Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So on today's episode, we are going to take off the secondary air injection system. We're going to explain what it does and why it needs to be removed and what you can use the spot for that's actually where the pump is on the head. But before we get into it, I kind of want to take this time to do a couple of quick announcements. So obviously we're still full steam ahead on the Trailblazer. Just ordered some more parts yesterday, some manifold bolts, some injector adapters, Marmon flange for the actual turbo, and a bunch of 4-inch piping for the downpipe. That being said, though, I have not forgotten about some of the other projects, one of which that a lot of people have been asking about, and I still do plan to do, is the 5-cylinder Colorado. So as of late, the 5-cylinder Colorado stock dyno video, which you can see right here, that's gotten a lot of views, and a lot of people have been asking me if I'm still doing that project. I am. I just want to get this done first. I also have something in the works in terms of the Colorado, but we'll get to that later. Secondly, as you can see, I'm wearing Black 57 shirts, one of his many that you can buy on his website. I highly recommend, if you're into Atlas content, go check out his website if you haven't already. Most people that are on my page watching the videos that I'm making probably came from his channel anyway. But this is a great way to support him and his channel and keeping the Atlas content up to date and relevant, and it helps them fund those projects that they're doing. And those guys, the Nelsons, have really pioneered this motor. So anything you could do to support them, that's extremely helpful. Secondly, I am going to have some of my own merchandise here in the coming months, one of which is for the Trailblazer specifically. So I did a poll, or I asked for feedback in my first video when I introduced the Trailblazer on what we should call it. I had a lot of good feedback. Some of my favorites are the Trailfoon, which is kind of like a nod to the old GMC Typhoon factory turbo 6-cylinder SUV from the 90s. I really like that one. I like Snail Trail. I thought that was funny. There's a few others that I like as well. Trying to keep it something short, something that like you would see this, or if you're referring to the Trailblazer to your buddies, like, oh, have you seen the Trailfoon, right? I really like that one. That's probably my favorite so far. But the merchandise I want to have is, I want to have a shirt made for this that shows the Trailblazer in SS form, at least, like pretty much a silver Trailblazer SS. It'll say TBSS, and then, but the Trailblazer SS, it'll stand for Trailblazer Straight 6 instead of, I think they stand for Super Sport normally. But I think the Trailblazer SS is funny because it does say Straight 6. And lastly, I've kind of been playing around with ideas for custom plates. So here are some of the custom plate ideas that I have. Whatever you guys think is the best, I'd like your feedback. I'm a huge fan of 2JZ Who, as well as Soccer Dad. I think that's funny. So give me your feedback. Let me know what you think. And yeah, let's get into the video. So if you're building a Trailblazer and you're dealing with the Atlas motor, especially if you're building it in the Trailblazer itself, you're most likely going to have this valve. Now, some of the engines had it, some of them did not. There's no rhyme or reason to which one's got it. However, I personally believe that the secondary air injection pump mainly came on Trailblazers that were allocated to be sold up north. So I want to talk a little bit about what this system does and why it's installed. So this is an emission-based system. This has nothing to do with combustion. This has nothing to do with performance. This is solely emission-based. So this valve allows air to flow into the cylinder head. However, it's going into the exhaust ports post-combustion. Now what happens is, on cold startup, you have a lot of unburnt fuel from from the motor. It's not burnt fuel in the combustion system. It's a known thing to add more fuel on cold start. Well, that unburnt fuel obviously is not good for emissions. So what happens is there's a little pump mounted on the driver's side frame rail. That pump comes on, and if you have one of these, sometimes you can hear it on cold startup. That pump comes on, and this valve opens, and it pumps fresh air into the exhaust post combustion again, and that fresh oxygen, which is needed for combustion, helps oxidize unburnt fuel and burn it off before it goes out the tailpipe, essentially. Now, this is a twofold thing. A, it helps combust fuel post exhaust to help emissions, and secondly, that post fuel combustion helps heat up the catalytic converter to get it to operating temperature. Typically, the system only runs for about 30 to 90 seconds after a cold start, and then it shuts off, and that's it. So you do not need this if you're definitely running a boosted application. So you can remove this system. And this valve specifically, you have to remove because it's in the way of the manifold, it's in the way of the turbo. It will not work on a Trailblazer. You cannot keep this system. But what you can do is you can still utilize the port that it connects to. So I'm going to take this off. I already have it loosely bolted. I just wanted to have it slightly bolted in here so you guys could see what I was talking about. It looks very familiar. That's what this hose goes to. This hose goes to the intake. This other hose comes from the valve. That's part of where it's getting its fresh oxygen is the intake. So if you have a factory stock air intake box, this bolts to the underside of it. It pulls air off of this, goes to the pump, pumps that air into this port right here on the exhaust. So here is the port that I'm referring to. This is the port that fresh air is funneled into, and then it is distributed amongst the exhaust ports into the exhaust. Now, what is the solution for this? Well, the units that did not come with this valve had this block off plate. This is what it looks like. It goes over that port and it just simply blocks it off. Now, this is the part number here for anyone that's interested. I got mine from Lime Swap. They used to sell these pretty frequently, but I will say that this is a discontinued GM part. You cannot go to the dealer and buy them. If they do not have them in stock, they cannot order it. They may have some on the shelf, but Lime Swap sold it to me for 10 bucks. You can find them on Amazon still to this day, and eBay. If you search this part number, they're really inexpensive. I mean, I'm literally like $10 or less. You can have it shipped to your door. And that is the solution for this, the quick and dirty solution. Now, if you want, you can tap, if you want to make your own, you can tap it with an 1/8 inch MPT, and you can monitor back pressure through this port since this is post-combustion exhaust. The same back pressure you would see in the turbo manifold is what you're going to see here. So it's a very useful port if you want to monitor that. But if you don't, like most, like myself, I don't plan on really monitoring it unless maybe I decide to turn it up and I really want to see more parameters. I just plan on boop, bolting that right there. It eliminates that valve. It cleans everything up. You no longer have an interference with your turbo, and everything is right. However, you still want to remove everything else that's in the way. This hose that goes to the intake, this other hose that goes to the valve, and then there, you can see here there's a plastic piece that's bolted onto the back of the head. Now it wraps around the head, and I'll put a picture of the schematic up so you can see what I'm talking about, but there's a single bolt that bolts this plastic piece into the back of the head. Now on the Trailblazer, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the blood on my knuckles. Prior to filming this video, I wanted to see if it was even possible to get it out. I do believe it is. I just don't have the tool that I need. You can get these ratchets that have a little bit of a deeper inset to the actual ratcheting portion, so you can get a bolt that's inset into something. However, I don't have that. So like a regular ratcheting wrench or a regular wrench is not going to be able to get the 13 or 14 millimeter head that's bolted into the cylinder head from the back. So what I plan on doing is I'm just going to take a Sawzall and cut these two ports, these plastic ports off, and then get these hoses out from under the hood, and then I'll show you what you have to do underneath the car. Pardon the poor lighting. But this is the driver's side frame rail. Now these two hoses are the same two hoses that you see going to under the hood. One of them is coming from the pump, and it's pumping fresh air into that valve, which is allowing air to go into the exhaust. And the other hose is coming from the intake, which is where it's drawing its fresh air from. So there's, as far as I know, there's one connector here. There may be another one here on the backside, I'm not sure. And then I believe it's these three 13mm bolts, the smaller ones on the bottom, holding the bracket in. I'll let you know here for sure once I pull it out, but essentially these hoses come off this whole bracket and pump. You can leave it installed if you want, just unplug it, or you can remove it and save a little bit of weight, which is what I plan to do. So I'm going to pull this out, and then I'll show you exactly what bolts hold it in, and then you can see what it looks like uninstalled, and you know what to look for when you're going to remove it yourself. All right, here's the air injection pump out of the vehicle. There's a plug right here. This plug was actually just for the relay, so I'll probably take this off and plug it back in just so I have that connector sealed. Those three bolts I showed you guys down there, this one here, this one here, and this one here, those were 13mm head bolts. Those were the bolts that hold this entire bracket in. Currently, I just have the hoses zip tied up underneath there because I want to wait till I get the vehicle on the lift so I can cut them up as high as possible. Now there you can see where I kind of sawzalled off the plastic tubes, kind of as far back as possible. I really don't mind if I don't ever remove that or not. You're never really going to see it. And then here's the block off plate installed with the original hardware that held on the valve. So this further one towards the firewall actually holds the trans fluid dipstick as well. I highly doubt that I can use this as is with the turbo manifold, so this is going to get modified. Maybe cut this piece back and then re-weld that L a little bit further back and pull the whole tube in closer, snake it through the manifold. Not really sure yet, but this is what it looks like when it's installed. And last but not least, I did want to bring up that once you remove that air injection pump, especially if you're using a stock computer like myself, you're probably going to want to go ahead and pull the fuse. Now, if you can see, it's fuse 56 for injection B. That's what it says, a 20 amp fuse. So if we locate fuse 56 here, it is right there. Between those two relays on the right. So it's that 20 amp yellow fuse right here. I'm gonna have to go ahead and pull these to get to it. Then just go ahead and pull that 20 amp fuse. Put these back. All right, so that's going to conclude removing the secondary air injection system and installing this block off plate so you have room for your turbo. And like I said, if you want, you can add a back pressure sensor there so you can monitor exhaust back pressure. However, myself, I'm just simple. I'm most likely going to run this, and that's it. So coming up soon, as soon as I get the fuel injector adapters, the stock injectors in here are EV6. The snake eater injectors that we're using are EV1. So I'm going from an EV6 to an EV1. I have those adapters. You can get on Amazon for like 20 bucks. That will be the next step. Probably the next episode is installing the fuel injectors as well as installing the fuel pump. Now, pulling this intake manifold off is definitely not an easy task. It's not difficult, but it is very involved. And the fuel rail sits between the between the intake manifold and the valve cover. So it's not really attached to the manifold, it's attached to the head, but you have to move the intake manifold to access them. So that's going to be it for this video. If you guys liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy the content and you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, and leave a comment section leave a comment in the section below if you have an idea for a license plate or a name for the Trailblazer, and if you're interested in potential merchandise for this or any of the other vehicles on the channel. Until next time, peace.